to the broadcast with some piano music composed and performed by my brother. Oh, and remembering to turn on the light as well. That helps. It's a bit bright. Whew. All right. It's still too bright. Oh, there we go. All right. Let's see if there's any comments. Marsha's here. Hello, Marsha. Good morning. You were able to get an alert and turn it on quickly. That's excellent news. I hope you're enjoying the music as well. I do love this music from my brother, and at some point, maybe I need to make some kind of licensing deal with him. Edward Windsor says both hi and good night. Well, thank you, Edward Windsor, for that greeting and farewell in such close succession. I hope you enjoyed the music. Brian says hi. Hello, Brian. And Marsha says very nice music. Thank you both. How's it going, Brian? How's your broadcast going? I'm presuming you're still on HAPS as well. And yes, I noticed a news story, a headline today that was highlighted on Twitter that said Ron DeSantis and Andrew Cuomo and Gavin Newsom all have something in common that might not be what you think. They all have similar ratings from the public, performance ratings, and that people overall are content with how their governors have managed things, which appears to be in relation to how they've managed COVID, which is interesting. I mean, they're different states and New York. Hang on, I'll turn the music off. It's my grandparents. Okay. All right. Brian hasn't broadcast lately because he's been working a lot. Well, that's very important work that you do, Brian. So, I hope you're still getting an okay work-life balance. And from what I hear, there are some healthcare workers contemplating leaving the profession. And indeed, that erosion is probably happening as we speak because they've been through so much with COVID. And I imagine it would be psychologically challenging to cope with public pushback against measures to contain the virus. Yeah, Brian says a lot have already left. I would imagine that to be the case. Because it's very hard and draining to meet the demands of taking care of the public during a pandemic where everything becomes more high stakes and contamination lurks around every corner. And hospitals have sometimes withheld PPE, personal protective equipment from nurses in order to reserve it for doctors who might actually spend less front-facing time with patients. And so there's issues of equity and respect, as well as extreme physical and emotional hardship from dealing with so much death and so much pushback from the public, many of whom were conditioned by the former president to distrust health authorities, to distrust doctors and nurses that told them the pandemic was real, and to blame doctors and nurses and buy into the deception that doctors would or nurses would somehow. Thanks, darling. Yeah, it didn't work. Would somehow benefit financially from falsely categorizing deaths as COVID deaths. And yes. So Brian says a lot have already left or moved to other areas of nursing. So you mean specifically there's a high attrition rate from the intensive care unit, from the ICUs. That is really the cold face of engagement with COVID cases, isn't it? Brian says, we still have patients coming in that deny COVID until their last breath. Whew. Is it too late for you to chat, Brian, or do you want to come on and describe that to us? I know it would be hard to work with people who are in such denial about not only their condition, but also actions that they may have taken that facilitated the spread of this deadly and debilitating disease. Yes. Brian's at work and on a break. No worries, Brian. Okay. It is tragic. It's tragic, and it's an ongoing legacy of death that was initiated by Donald Trump, who sought to abuse the pandemic to obtain electoral advantage in terms of giving him an excuse to sabotage mail-in vote, to undercut mail-in voting. Republicans used to love mail-in voting because their voters used to use it very regularly and find ways of easily voting and participating in democracy. And they were encouraged to do so by politicians, and everything was fine. But with the advent of COVID, Donald Trump understood that mail-in voting would become an increasingly desirable option, and that the people who would desire mail-in voting the most would be people concerned that COVID was a real threat. So he lied to the public and told them it wasn't a real threat. And he hoped to divide the public into Biden voters availing themselves of a mail-in option and Trump voters being taught to fear and suspect mail-in voting as somehow open to fraud. And he did that to shepherd Biden voters into the mail-in system and then sabotage the mail-in vote, sabotage the functioning of America's United States Postal Service, together with his co-conspirator, Louis DeJoy. So that plan is, I'm speculating about its existence, but the evidence is very strongly in favor of that being what Trump did, that the delays in the mail arose as a consequence of the Trump appointee, Louis DeJoy, his actions in dismantling assets that belonged to the Postal Service, the millions of dollars worth of mail sorters that were disassembled and put on the sidewalk. Brian has got to head back to work, but will have to get together with me sometime to do a broadcast. That would be lovely. And Edward Windsor says he's heard that Portugal hasn't had any deaths for 2 days. I don't know if that's true, but it's easy to look up. And we know that Israel reached 0 COVID deaths, but they have been notable on the world stage for achieving a very high rate of vaccination within their population, even with holdout, extremely religious populations that are naturally more susceptible to conspiracy theories because they're just good at believing things without evidence. Apologies to any religious people, but particularly to any religious people with tendencies to believe things without evidence. It's not always a healthy tendency, and that circumstance is really highlighted by pandemics where the public needs to be informed, the public needs to be able to engage with evidence and act accordingly. Someone says, hello from Reno. Which state is Reno in? Is Reno in Texas? I remember it's associated with divorce in my head, meaning that maybe it was one of the places early on where you could get a divorce. Now, I've got something to share with you all that is distressing, so I'll put up a trigger warning first, and that is video from a train station. Where a man lost his life in circumstances that were quite similar to George Floyd. Namely, he died after being arrested and held in a prone position, hands handcuffed behind his back, and knelt on by police officers for 9 minutes and 16 seconds. So very similar to down to the minute of the time that Officer Chauvin Officer Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck. So there were no bystanders at the time taking footage of it, so it didn't receive any level of public awareness of what had happened relatively to the awareness that we had of George Floyd's death after we observed the callousness of Officer Chauvin continuing to maintain a knee on the neck of the man he was detaining whilst people protested and drew his attention to the threat to George Floyd's life. So I think it is really important because it helps us see a pattern that even though there was less callousness on display in this footage, and there weren't police officers in this instance, they were transit officers, so not held to the same low accountability standards as police officers, even lower standards. So they didn't have to release the footage earlier. They said they were obeying the family's wishes in waiting to conduct an investigation before releasing the footage to the public. Kim's here and says hello. Hi Kim. And yes, all right. So this is his name is Angel Fernandez. And he was encountered whilst walking along the tracks of a railway station, and he had been previously diagnosed with schizophrenia and took medication. So they engaged with him because they were concerned that he would hurt himself if he was in some way intoxicated or disorientated from mental illness and by himself and walking on the train tracks, which is a risky activity. But whilst they were trying to save him from being run over by a train, they knelt on him for so long that he died. And you can see during the video that as he struggles, they tell him to be still. And it implies an urgent need for reform that police officers really need to immediately understand that positional asphyxia will kill you, and that being arrested in that way, being held in a prone position, handcuffed behind your back, exposes you to greater risk of death because your body is deprived of oxygen in that position. It's harder to breathe. And I know police officers, when they're being trained, get maced sometimes to prepare for what it might be like. They get maced and they get tased. Perhaps police officers need, as a matter of urgency, to be put in a prone position for a few seconds to see how your body instinctively wants to live and will fight being kept in that position. So they need to stop having that as a goal to try and subdue someone and keep them subdued in a position which is a threat to their life. It's hard to just relax into a position that will deprive your body of oxygen. So enough said. This is some of the footage taken from the train station, from the CCT footage. Actually, no, this is from their body cameras. All right. So here they encounter Angel Fernandez. So they're chasing him. I'm going to skip forward to when they're arresting him, and I'm not going to watch very long of it because it is hardcore. Because he's trying to struggle, and it's a struggle for his life. But he is handcuffed on the ground with his hands behind his back, which is a threat to his existence. And the police officers do not appear to be aware of that at all.
Hey, relax, dude. Jacking off. Jacking off. Get into he's now on the ground. Jacking off. Go ahead. I remember picturing aliens. That's Tupac. Me and alien. Red hell. The train tracks are pigs! Yep, I have that radio call already.
Skipping forward.
From the car, he's settled down a little bit. PD's 97, I just don't see where they're at.
So, again, to me, there's some differences between this and the murder of George Floyd in that they do seem to express some active concern for him. And again, this man is different to George Floyd in that he's more actively, I think, delusional. I mean, not actively delusional, because George Floyd wasn't delusional at all. He was concerned that he would die, and he very rationally asked them to spare his life and said goodbye to his children. But
approximately 40 years old, unconscious, not responding.
mm-hmm.
We're just down from this car. He's settled down a little bit.
So they do seem completely unaware that positional asphyxia is a thing, and that it's that it's compromising his breathing.
We're good for now.
We're good right now.
Okay. Our units can slow down. PD 97. Ash Street, Ash and the crossing, Ash and the tracks.
It's an equal one. Yeah. Did he come down a little bit?
Huh? Yeah, he's calmed down a little bit. Angel, you still alive, dude? Angel. Hey. Yes, I got his ID right here.
Wait, does he have a pulse?
I don't know.
How was he acting? Was he really sweaty? Now roll him over.
No, he wasn't really sweating.
Angel! Medics.
Angel. He said he was smoking something and then
Approximately 40 years old, unconscious, not responding. Here, roll him over this side. Check a pulse again. I don't think it's going. Pulse? Yeah. You going? Yeah, faint. Hey, for him, he's got a very, very faint.
Okay, so that was the end of the video when they appear to notice that he's not breathing and call for a medic. Kim says that they can see and feel that he's not breathing. You'd think that they would notice that, wouldn't you? Anyway, the autopsy was conducted, and the two doctors involved claimed that his death was a consequence of heart disease, and what else did they say? I'll bring up the article. So yes, the transit system has settled a claim from the family for $5.5 million. So those are Metropolitan Transit Service security workers. And, oh no, sorry, they knelt on his neck for 6 minutes and 7 seconds. It's not 9 minutes. Although I feel like I've read two different details in that. So, yeah, they're so keen to have somebody subdued. Now, I wanted to say what the doctors suggested. And there was a state law that took effect 3 months before Zapata Hernandez's death, and that mandates the release of body camera video within 45 days in instances where police shoot someone or use force that results in death or great bodily injury, with some exceptions. But that law only applies to police and custodial officers, so not Metropolitan Transit workers or its security officers. So they didn't feel compelled to release that video earlier, and a year passed. So it was October the 16th, 2019. So he had trace amounts of marijuana, but no illegal drugs in his system. And his family said he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and took medicine for it daily. But the autopsy was sealed at the request of the San Diego police. And they felt that the public knowing could narrow the scope of their investigation. And they also claimed that Zapata Hernandez's family did not want the video made public, while the legal claim against the agency went through a mediation process, which eventually led to its settlement. Oh, and I'm just noticing a sidebar headline here on the article, which notes that there's a virus surge in Gaza, because even as we applaud Israel for reaching zero COVID deaths, Gaza is still being blockaded by Israel. So the cases there has to do with some culpability on the part of the Israeli government. That's a side note, but it also relates to hyper-nationalism and just denial of the value of some human life. So if Angel Zapata Fernandez's life had been of more value to those transit officers, they would have paid more attention to whether or not he was breathing and not just congratulated themselves on having successfully subdued him. They were like, yep, he's still now. So, we've done a good job, until somebody noted that he didn't respond to his name and that he didn't have a pulse. So 2 opinions provided by medical examiners did not support that being held down by one of the MTS employees' knee substantially contributed to Mr. Zapata Hernandez's death. So they said the 2 security guards could not be held legally liable. They no longer work for MTS. One of them became a canine handler with the agency instead. So the forensic medicine expert who testified as a witness for the prosecution in Chauvin's case said Floyd died from positional asphyxia, and testified he died because he had no oxygen in his body. And Dr. William Smock also reviewed the findings of the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office, and he said Mr. Angel Zapata Hernandez was handcuffed in the prone position, meaning face down, and was in the custody of the Metropolitan Transit Service when he was rendered unconscious and died as a direct consequence of the application of external pressure to his back, neck, and abdomen. So the 2 pathologists who conducted the autopsy on Zapata Hernandez, they said several factors contributed to the death, including the struggle, including being in a prone position with pressure to the neck and torso, and a host of other factors. That sounds very similar to the people who tried to pretend that George Floyd's death was inevitable and would have happened because of pre-existing medical conditions on George Floyd's part. Zapata Hernandez was in his 20s, and it's just very, very difficult to understand how people preparing an autopsy could still think it's appropriate to say, well, he had pre-existing medical conditions. if you have medical conditions, if I have diabetes, but a police officer comes along and handcuffs me in a prone position and kneels on my neck for 6 minutes, then my death is because of that. It's not because of my diabetes. The precipitating causative factor of death is the application of pressure. Oh, Molly's here. Hello, Molly. And Kim notes 5.5 million is an admission of guilt. Yes, kind of is, isn't it? And Sean notes that it's because they are bullies who were given badges, and Marsha couldn't even watch it. Yes, it is hard to watch. So I totally understand some people not being able to watch it all. I'm just going to bring up on the side here these autopsy findings. So this is what I was just reading. So Dr. Timothy Jong and Dr. Robert Stabley listed the struggle, the prone position, and a host of health factors. And Dr. Jong, when asked if Zapata Hernandez would have died without a knee on his neck, said, "I favor that he probably would have." And I'm going to just make that the whole screen for a second, because if we as a society try to reduce the power and influence of supremacist thinking, we have to acknowledge it even in its most passive forms that we're most likely to be acquiescent with. When a doctor in a position of authority makes a pronouncement like that and says, "I favor that he probably would have died," i.e., he was just likely to keel over, and it's a coincidence that people were kneeling on his neck for 6 minutes. Like that's, yeah, he probably would have died anyway. He literally said, I favor that he probably would have still died. That's extraordinary, and it's extraordinarily complicit in the dehumanization of people who are detained for any reason by officers, whether they be transit officers or police officers. And it shows a lack of ability to empathize or to imagine the self and to say, no, wait, if I was on medication for something, if I had trace amounts of marijuana in my body, if I had some signs of heart disease, maybe some arterial, some elements of arterial occlusion, meaning maybe he had some hardening of the arteries or some blockage of the arteries. He was only in his 20s though, and he's not an obese man. He's just a fairly average build person, I think. If people try to look for excuses in order to excuse officers, they're investing in protecting an institution rather than investing in being truthful and being truthful about an individual. Eleanor's here and saying, "Good day, Dav. Hope you're well." Thanks, Eleanor. Hope you're well too. Sean notes that the officers sound a lot like insurance companies, pre-existing medical conditions. Yes, although they're not cops, they are pathologists conducting an autopsy on behalf of the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office. But they're hired by an institution, and they appear to have institutional blindness or a tendency to favor reporting things in a way that would protect the institution from criticism. So I think the $5.5 million as settlement, as you've said, indicates that the authorities understand that they're culpable for his death, but those medical examiners still worked to shield the institution from further criticism by pretending that it was just as likely that that man would have just died anyway. All right, so that was something I wanted to talk about because at least I feel like we could make a change with relation to awareness and how broadly we can spread that understanding that positional asphyxia is a thing that makes that puts people's lives in jeopardy, and that there should immediately be training to that effect, expanded and administered thoroughly all across the nation so that we don't have any more of these deaths where officers say, no, my priority was to subdue the person and I achieved that by kneeling on their neck, so that everybody knows that's no longer okay, and that even holding people in a prone position is an increase to their risk of death. And in San Diego, they've apparently resolved not to hold people in prone positions anymore, which is what's needed. People need to, okay, maybe you handcuff someone, but then you should roll them onto their side in the recovery position. Yes, that you don't have to make it a firm goal to try and make a person completely immovable, because whilst that might make your job outcome feel tidier, it's a significant risk factor for death. All right. I'm just looking at my bookmarks, and somebody noted, someone by the name of LeVar Burton, who has 2.1 million followers. So he must be well known in the States. And there's 37 seconds of him explaining that we don't really have cancel culture right now. We have consequence culture. And it's interesting because I still see Republicans making a big deal out of cancel culture, because so much of the Republican platform is pretending to be mad about things and trying to whip up the public into a state of outrage that satisfies their emotions and maybe sates their appetite, because a guilty conscience has a lot of appetite for lies, for projected culpability on other people's parts. A guilty conscience makes someone like a wounded animal. It is a dangerous state of affairs. Reading Rainbow and Star Trek. He started Roots. Thank you, Christopher. All right, well, here he is. I'll press play.
In terms of cancel culture, I think it's misnamed. That's a misnomer. I think we have a consequence culture, and that consequences are finally encompassing everybody in the society, whereas they haven't been ever in this country. So I think that there are good signs that are happening in the culture right now. And I think it has everything to do with a new awareness on people who were simply unaware of the real nature of life in this country for people who have been othered since this nation began. In terms of cancel culture, I think it's
Okay, so it went back to the beginning, but he said, yep, cancel culture is a misnomer from his perspective, that it's consequence culture, and those consequences are spreading now to include everybody. Which reminds me of being on a Clubhouse chat the other day and hearing someone say that, it's not comfortable to live in a state of fear where things that you say could jeopardize your career if it's deemed to be inappropriate. And I wanted to almost say that he was trying to champion a motto of white careers matter. And I anticipate it would feel uncomfortable if you suspect yourself of having said racist things, or if you suspect yourself of enough internal racism that you worry you might accidentally say something that reveals your inner racism and that your career will be cancelled as a consequence, and that would be a discomforting feeling as well. So yes, there's lots of things to be afraid about if you're worried about yourself and you're worried about your own morals and your own standards. The men who say, oh, well, I'm not going to allow myself to be in a room with a woman anymore because I'm so concerned about false accusations. Are they really concerned about false accusations, or are they concerned that they may accidentally do something that will harass a woman, or that people might unearth something that they've done previously that was harassing? But having said that, I guess I do have a little bit more sympathy, because I do believe that women and men are capable of making false accusations, that it's just because it's a relatively rare phenomenon doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and doesn't mean it doesn't exercise an emotionally terrifying effect on people who see it happening and fear the injustice of that affecting their lives. So I'm happy for there to be consequence culture overall, as what's his name, LeVar Burton. Am I pronouncing it properly? Is it LeVar? Maybe it's LeVar. LeVar Burton noted eloquently that it's a good thing for people to be held to account, and it's a product of an increasing pattern of understanding, that more people understand now what it really is like to live in the United States if you are part of an othered demographic group that has been othered since the beginning of since the founding of America as it exists today. So I'm just going to play half of what he said again.
Ever in this country. So I think that there are good signs that are happening in the culture right now. And I think it has everything to do with a new awareness on people who were simply unaware of the real nature of life in this country for people who have been othered since this nation began.
Okay, so yeah, I'm glad I listened to that again, because he's suggesting that, you know, maybe whilst we can't cure racism in the hearts of people who are very unrepentantly racist, that there is at least a subset of people who were uninformed and unaware, who embraced the idea of colorblindness, as if to say, yes, all discrimination is behind us, and we can move forward together being oblivious to color, as if there's never been any disadvantage, as if there's never been any baked in systems of persecution or oppression, as if people are no longer struggling with the consequences of racism in the States. And the appetite for that, not only an appetite for things to be so nice and simple, we don't have to worry that America is racist anymore. We don't have to worry about anything to do with racism. We have a clean slate. Obama gave us a clean slate. We are in a post-racial society now, so don't ever remind us about what we did. Like, we don't need to talk about that now. That's just dragging us down. There must have been so many people that gleefully embraced that because they didn't know how to manage their emotions in relation to guilt. They didn't know how to reconcile themselves to American history and those historical ripples that carry on into the present, the inertia of racism and the compounding legacy of racism. So if your grandfather was a GI in World War II and he was Black, so he was denied the same benefits that returning white soldiers obtained, and then other people were able to have houses and build generational wealth as a consequence of being a white soldier as opposed to a Black soldier, the injustice of that magnifies over time because that wealth grows more easily into greater wealth, and a family languishing in relative financial hardship, watching somebody else whose father served in the same war and was exposed to the same risks, but was rewarded in a very different way, that injustice is magnified over time. It doesn't evaporate over time. I'm going to write that down so I try and remember to. Okay. I was taking notes yesterday. It says white political dominance. That's my writing. And then my daughter's written that I'm a superstar, that Mummy is the best cook ever, but I really need to teach her how to spell the word cook. And she is the best hugger and runner. And that's really blue sky thinking to say that I'm the best runner, but I still love it. All right. Injustice that is amplified over time, not evaporated. And you know why it's important for me to do this, or for any white person to do this, is because Black people will often tell us that they are tired. They're literally tired of dealing with the fallout and the legacy of racism and the persistence of racism in their lives. So we have to do some of that work to help white people reconcile themselves and reconcile their own consciences and their own psychologies to what happened. Because that impulse to avoid, to deny the truth, and to skip merrily over to an explanation that is very incompatible with reality, that gap has very negative consequences, because the more detached you become from reality, the more vulnerable you become to the reassurances of an exploitative con artist who tells you your understanding of the world is correct. There is no racism against Black people in America. There is only racism against white people who have to miss out on the affirmative action and all the benefits that are being magically directed towards Black people that we are going to pretend exist. So that reality gap is very consequential in a destructive way. So, yep, it's our job to do that white people roundup, to help round up our own collective awareness of American history and American present dynamics. Marsha is noting she can't sleep well at all. She's up all night. Molly is asking Eleanor if she broadcasted. Yeah, and Eleanor's sleep is all over the place too. I'm sorry, you guys. I hope your sleep improves. I have something else to show you. And that is an account called What Biden Has Done. And they're very good at making spreadsheets and accounting for what Biden has achieved in office, which is a very important thing to stay on top of, given the reach and the power of disinformation within the right-wing media machine. That is to say, the cumulative effect of Fox News disinformation, OAN disinformation, Newsweek. Is it Newsweek? No. Newsmax disinformation that all seeks to disparage Joe Biden and the Democrats. So they've got a whole blog post recapping Biden's third month in office. Our blog maintains one of the most comprehensive lists of the president's accomplishments anywhere on the internet. So I will read that later, but in the meantime, Kamala Harris has announced that the US will provide an additional $310 million in humanitarian relief to Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. So that includes food relief and safety and protection funding for refugees, which is so important because refugees have really suffered during COVID because they cannot make it easily into the countries that have closed their borders in order to win the support of the public, to feel like, yes, when you're undergoing hardship, and there's disease transmitting within the community, we don't allow free access to our country. We shut down our borders. So there's been that impediment to seeking refugee status. And it's been often noted that, you can prevent people seeking refugee status if they have enough to eat where they are, if they are not in a position of such precarity that they abandon their homes and embark on potentially treacherous, deadly journeys to the relative perceived safety of the US. Marsha notes that it's been such a hard year for all of us. I know, I really know. Molly sticks to watching BBC News. That's interesting. Yes, and you need to send COVID vaccines too. Well, then there's good news on that front as well, because the Biden administration has agreed to release, pending some safety checks, to release the AstraZeneca doses to the rest of the world. They're donating 60 million AstraZeneca doses as soon as the checks have been completed. And there's the largest summer food program in US history has been announced for 34 million students, and a task force to promote unionization of the workforce, which is great, to help swing the pendulum towards workers a bit more, acknowledging that corporatism has really become a power player in American life, in no small part because wealthy corporate billionaires have been able to buy influence, that they have been donating billions of dollars to the political system, to funding and supporting and promoting certain political candidates who then voted for tax cuts for corporations and appointed Supreme Court justices who would rule in the favor of employers and against employees in consequential decisions. So there's also going to be an investigation into Louisville Police Department, the police department in Kentucky, I think, where Breonna Taylor was murdered, essentially, by police officers who chose to open full-throated fire in response to a single warning bullet from a man Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who thought his home was being broken into by police officers who did not, according to some witnesses, did not announce themselves when they were carrying out this no-knock warrant situation that they had authorized. Just on the suspicion that Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend was suspected of dealing in drugs, and they didn't even know she had a new boyfriend, and they didn't even know that she lived with a new boyfriend, and just very negligently organized a no-knock raid on her house and then shot her to death in a flurry of bullets. And then the complicit Attorney General, Cameron, his surname is Cameron, and he then only put one charge before the grand jury for one police officer who had shot into a neighboring apartment, as well as profusely spraying bullets through Breonna Taylor's home. So that's good that the Louisville Police Department's going to be investigated. But this was the key thing that I wanted to highlight right now. Actually, two key things. One is that the number of children in CBP is something Border Patrol. I've forgotten. I can look it up. That's all right. We've always got the ability to look at it. Customs and Border Protection, that's it. Okay. So the number of children in Customs and Border Protection continues to decline rapidly. Phew, there are now only 1,368 children in CBP facilities, down a whopping 76% from the peak of 5,727 in only a month. So that is awesome. Yes, the children are in HHS care, but that's much better than being in CBP custody. And it shows that the Biden administration is getting up to speed with helping process the claims of child asylum seekers who have traveled to the US in an unaccompanied state, saying we needed to come here for reasons of escaping gang violence or hunger, and to be with relatives that we have who are already in the US. And that is typically why they turn up unaccompanied. And it's very quantitatively and qualitatively different from the Trump policy of purposefully separating children from parents. But that's a distinction that's often lost on people who just stick to a very simplistic slogan of kids in cages. And they say there were kids in cages under Trump and there's kids in cages under Biden. Trump ripped small children away from their parents to create kids in detention, in cage situations. Biden is dealing with an influx of unaccompanied children who have reached the border without adults. And and they are briefly detained before being introduced to a process that will reunite them with relatives, because they understand that it's not ideal to have children in institutional care at all. So phew, but they had to rebuild a lot of that infrastructure because Trump, fired people to have less employees dealing with the needs of migrants, because he was interested in dehumanizing them and imprisoning them. All right. Somebody called the dog walker guy is here. You seem to be a regular viewer. Hello, you say G'day USA. We are primarily talking to people in the US, it's true. So anyway, I'm just really pleased with their progress. And then the next news is about the AstraZeneca vaccine. Oh, and the Biden administration has begun the process to restore the waiver for California to set their own emission standards for cars and trucks after it was revoked by the previous administration in 2019. This will allow California to introduce stricter climate policies on a national level, because they're pioneering it for us. Phew. And the US is going to urgently deploy a strike team to India to work with India's public experts on laboratory services, epidemiology, modeling of the disease, infection prevention, vaccine rollout, a senior Biden official told reporters on a press call. So that's really good. They've responded to concern and criticism about that people want there to be help for India, and people understand that Indian lives are on the line because of the high rate of cases, and that the Biden administration also understand the interconnected nature of our world, and that if you abandon India to just suffer as a consequence of leadership failures in India, you have to acknowledge that high prevalence of the disease there will likely lead to the development of new mutations, including mutations that are potentially vaccine resistant. So it's in all our interests to try and lift each other up when we stumble, even though, yes, the Prime Minister of India, Modi, is kind of a Trump flavor tyrant who does bad things to his constituents because he doesn't care. He's comfortable knowing that he can whip up religious extremism and so set people against each other in the same way that Trump divided America to conquer it. And I'm happy to see a hashtag saying Tucker must go. I really want people to note that having cable services is making people fund Tucker Carlson, fund Fox News, even if they don't watch Fox at all. So because I think Fox News receives $1.45 for everybody who subscribes to cable, the cumulative effect of all the people who don't watch Fox means for every Fox viewer, there are 7 non-Fox viewers paying, collectively speaking, $7 towards to the Fox network. So propping up the dissemination of what is essentially neo-Nazi propaganda that argues white Americans are being displaced, and that the power of their vote is being reduced by migrants immigrating to the US, and that is diluting their political power. Molly thinks there is a new variant in India. Yes, we believe there is a new variant in India. I think it's something like B1617, and that's possibly one reason why it has been spreading even more virulently than might otherwise have been expected. Oh no, Tucker Carlson is now telling his audience to harass people who wear face masks outside. If they see children wearing masks, Tucker says, the response should be no different than when you see a kid being abused. Call the police immediately. Contact Child Protective Services. Oh my gosh, that is just awful. Trigger warning, I'm going to play some Tucker because I think it's important for us to know and to not turn away from this evil that is being done in the United States. And we have to be aware of it in order to take steps to respond to it. So people need to see it to help build the revulsion and build the resolve to tell everybody, turn off cable until the cable providers get the message that it's not okay for your cable viewership to be funding the white supremacist network that is also endangering public health. And that might help, because accusations of racism might not be enough to unite Americans around a goal of ousting Fox and ousting Tucker Carlson. But watching him willfully and purposely endanger the lives of family members, endanger people's lives by encouraging his audience to call the police if they see a child wearing a mask.
We did give in. This grotesque version of Halloween went on for more than a year, and it's still going on. Not even Tony Fauci still pretends that masks are medically necessary. Instead, masks are purely a sign of political obedience, like Kim Il-sung pins in Pyongyang. We wear them because we have to. The only people who wear masks voluntarily outside are zealots and neurotics. How neurotic are they? Well, we know. A Pew survey from last March found that 64% of white Americans who classify themselves as liberal or very liberal have been diagnosed with an actual mental health condition. And you see them everywhere when you walk down the street in any major city. If you dare to go on foot from Union Station to the Capitol, for example, in Washington without wearing a mask, angry Biden voters will snort at you in judgment. How could you? They're saying from behind the gauze. How could you? That's the question we should be asking of them in return. The rest of us should be snorting at them first. They're the aggressors. It's our job to brush them back and restore the society we were born in. So the next time you see someone in a mask on the sidewalk or on the bike path, do not hesitate. Ask politely but firmly, would you please take off your mask? Science shows there is no reason for you to be wearing it. Your mask is making me uncomfortable. We should do that, and we should keep doing it until wearing a mask outside is roughly as socially accepted as lighting a Marlboro in an elevator. It's repulsive. Don't do it around other people. That's the message we should send, because it's true. As for forcing children to wear masks outside, that should be illegal. Your response when you see children wearing masks as they play should be no different from your response to seeing someone beat a kid in Walmart. Call the police immediately. Contact Child Protective Services. Keep calling until someone arrives. What you're looking at is abuse. It's child abuse, and you are morally obligated to attempt to prevent it. If it's your own children being abused, then act accordingly. Let's say your kid's school emailed you to announce that every day after lunch, your sixth grader was going to get punched in the face by a teacher. How would you respond to that? That's precisely how you should respond when they tell you that your kids have to wear masks on the soccer field. That is unacceptable, it is dangerous, and we should act like it, because it is. But too few of us have responded like that.
Molly called Verizon and had the Fox News channels removed, and then you didn't have to pay $2.35. That's fantastic. I kind of want to interview you about that, Molly, so that we can make maybe a brief broadcast one day that you can just share with everybody and say, look, you can do it. Don't be afraid to ask for it. Molly asked and it happened. So if you ever want to do that, let me know. And we'll talk about the steps you took to have Fox News channels removed from your cable package. Because we have to. We really can't stand by passively and let somebody like that control public health or sabotage public health in that way. Now, it's interesting because I have a degree of agreement with Tucker Carlson. I agree with him that it's scientifically not necessary to wear masks outside, that transmission is very unlikely to occur outside and it's not necessary. But he says wearing masks is a sign of obedience. And I would say wearing masks is a sign of caution, and it's modeling a behavior that people want to be replicated in indoor settings, because wearing masks indoors is necessary. But if you have people emboldened by Tucker to go around yelling at parents in public and saying, I should rip that mask from your child's face. You're abusing them, and I'm going to physically intervene to stop you from abusing your child. It's not harmful to wear a mask outside. It's not necessary, but it's not causing any damage to a child. There's no respiratory impairment. It's just a mask. And if your child has a cold, it is good to stop them from sneezing on playground equipment or on each other. Molly says yes, she's good with that. The person I talked to was argument. Oh, you mean they argued with you, but you persisted. That's excellent, Molly. See, that's why we need a video, so we can talk through and maybe script out what to say to just push through that initial reluctance, but to get your cable provider to agree to remove the Fox channels. Yes, Eleanor makes a good point of how is wearing a mask even close to punching someone in the face. So that is part of Tucker's emotional manipulation strategies, to falsely conflate wearing a mask, which you might encourage your child to do because you're concerned about COVID, to somebody who's literally physically abusing their child, which is not done to help anybody. Although I imagine abusive parents might argue, I'm just punching them in the face to teach them about life, which I need to do to help them. So obviously people are capable of rationalizing some harmful behaviors, but Tucker Carlson is arguing for his audience to go out there and instruct people to take masks off. Fox News, and we remember the conservative arguments that they're so pro-freedom, telling their viewers to go up and say, how dare you wear a mask? You're making me uncomfortable. And I'm going to aggressively insist that you remove that mask. And I'm going to do the microaggression. It's not even micro, the aggression of repeatedly calling police and child protective services until somebody comes out to condemn the responsible action of being visible with masks. Because being visible with masks is good. It's a pro-social decision to make. I wouldn't do it that much, but where I am, which is Singapore, I'm in Singapore, and you have to wear a mask unless you're exercising. So really, walking around, you could kind of say I'm energetically exercising, but it's a stretch. So really, just you wear a mask and you just do it, even though the science does suggest outdoor transmission is effectively non-existent. You do it because it's an expression of solidarity with overall viral mitigation efforts, overall efforts to say mask wearing is effective to prevent the disease in indoor settings. So you wear it outside so people can see your masks, so everybody still remembers that mask wearing is necessary, so that you don't forget to wear a mask inside where your respiratory exudations could literally inadvertently contaminate someone. Neil Nelson, when you say that cloth masks do nothing, or that the only mask which does something is the N95, it's ludicrously anti-scientific for you to say that. And you probably are one of those people referencing an old study that said masks, different types of masks had different types of efficacy. That study never compared mask wearing versus not mask wearing. So no, it is still very important to wear a mask indoors. And the mechanism for that is very plausible, that you are catching some of the droplets. It's not 100% effective to capture all the droplets that emanate from you, the aerosol tiny droplets or the medium-sized droplets. And yes, an N95 mask has more complete sealing your breath, so there's no escaping air from around near the nose or the cheeks or the chin or anything like that. But some are contained by a cloth mask. More so if you wear a dual layer of mask, yes, but some Americans are doing that because Americans are still dying, because Americans are still getting sick, and COVID is still infecting people with a condition that gives some people long-term disabilities. So am I able to block that person? Because I don't feel confident in my ability to discourage them from participating. I think, there we go. I think that's wise. And people on the conservative side of politics do often misunderstand the First Amendment, which is an amendment supposed to guarantee your right to speak free of government interference, but it doesn't guarantee the right to speak freely amongst your peers on a public platform. So I can mute people who come here to spread deceptive propaganda. In Long Island, where Marsha is, you've not seen any anti-mask hysteria, I guess because you're not in a Tucker Carlson prime audience territory. Knowledge El Shabazz says, I'm just trying to be safe. Wearing a mask the right way will help too. Tucker is desperate for ratings. He'll next be telling you to shame your grandma into removing her mask. Yes. Desperate for ratings and desperate to divide the public, desperate to retain conservative loyalty by making them feel like they have an enemy, giving them that moral clarity that the Democrats are trying to oppress you and that they're wrong. Desperate to try and counteract the appeal of Joe Biden, who is doing a lot of things to help Americans and who intends to do more. And Tucker Carlson can't have that because he is paid to discourage people from just even listening reasonably to what the Democrats propose. He needs to permanently maintain them in a frenzied oppositional state of mind, a frenzied, emotionally riled up, irrational state of mind. Pennsylvania has a mask mandate and masks are required in all public areas of Baltimore. That's cool. Yes, and because masks help, and areas that have had mask mandates maintained over time have fared better in a public health sense. All right, everybody. Well, that's been an hour from me. So that's the pro-democracy variety hour with DavCat for today. Thank you for your participation as always. Oh, should I sing a song before I go? Because Marsha asked for that yesterday and I was really pleased. So it's a work in progress. The pitch isn't perfect, but I hope you enjoy it. It's the Cups song, which might be familiar to people who've watched Anna Kendrick sing it in the Pitch Perfect movie. Yay, Marsha's happy. And Knowledge El Shabazz says, thanks for sharing again. No, I'm going to sing, Sean. I'm going to sing. Singing is what I like to do. I hope one day I write some songs that help disseminate useful public messages to counteract the destructive impact of disinformation from right-wing media and disinformation from the far left as well. Knowledge is going to watch the replay, and Marsha gave me a super clap award. Thank you. That's very encouraging. I'm already getting the super clap and I didn't sing it. Hang on. Okay. Thank you, Christopher. I've got my ticket for the long way round, 2 bottles of whiskey for the way, and I sure would like some sweet company. I'm leaving tomorrow, what do you say? When I'm gone, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my hair, you're gonna miss me everywhere, oh, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. Gone, when I'm gone, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my walk, you're gonna miss me by my talk, oh, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. I got my ticket for the long way around, the one with the prettiest of views. I've got mountains, it's got rivers, it's got sights to give you shivers, but it sure would be prettier with you. When I'm gone, when I'm gone, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. Gonna miss me by my walk, you're gonna miss me by my talk, oh. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone, when I'm gone, when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my head, you're gonna miss me everywhere, oh. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone, when I'm gone, when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my walk, you're gonna miss me by my talk, oh. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. Knowledge loves the mic, which, yes, is just a psychological prompt to remember to open my mouth while I sing. And thanks, Christopher. Thanks, everybody. The super claps and the Got Talent Award. I'm going to take a picture of Marsha's comment that says collaborate with your brother, and I'm going to send it to my brother. Marsha liked it. Brava. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you kindly. I hope everybody has a good rest and that I remember your sleeping struggles and resolve to keep broadcasting, try to broadcast earlier so that I'm not complicit in the disruption of your sleep, because getting wound up before bed is not conducive to winding down to go to sleep. So Sean says, yay, Knowledge likes the microphone. And thank you so much to the awards from Christopher and Molly and Marsha. Thank you all so much. And for the compliments. All of your support is very much appreciated. And I hope to continue on a path of finding ways to positively contribute to society, be it culturally or politically or intellectually. Marsha says, thank you, good night. I enjoy your broadcasts. Hooray. Hooray, Marsha. Thank you. I enjoy your presence in the audience for my broadcasts as well. Thank you, Christopher, Molly. Knowledge El Shabazz always goes to bed after watching my broadcasts. And Christopher says, take care. And even Neil, who I muted before, says, good night, Davcat. Well, thank you, Neil. Good night to you too. Take care, everyone. See you all sooner rather than later. Bye.